Hi, this is Donna, and this is just a very quick lesson on doing borders and corners using Quilters Creative Touch 4 Gold. Big shout out to Marie at Grace Company who walked me through this on the phone. She is just wonderful. And I know that they are working on a more cohesive video, but it'll be a while before that's out, so I thought I'd go ahead and just record what I have. So first thing you do is click on Borders, and it's going to launch the border portion of this software. So imagine this is your quilt top. These are your the outside borders of your quilt, or this is the last border on your quilt, I'm sorry. This is the edge of your quilt, and of course this will be the inside border line. So what I suggest is that you take some muslin or a solid color fabric or something and draw these lines, not the diagonal lines, but draw these lines on it, and also draw some straight lines down, and then replicate this at the bottom so that you'll have basically a box and a box. And I would do that and then practice this before you do it on a live quilt. So the first thing you do is select your style as far as what you want your corner to be. Now watch in the corner, when I select one of these buttons, the gray lines change based on what kind of corner I've chosen. I find that the majority of corners are this style here on the right, and so I would go ahead and start with that one. These buttons here represent the lines, the outside lines of your quilt and the insides of your border. Okay, so for instance, this button right here, it represents the top left corner of your quilt, and this second button to the right here, wherever the dot is where you need to be looking. So this represents the inside border right here, and that's how you're going to place it. So with your move your machine over to the top left point of your quilt, and I'm going to say it's about right here, and then select this first button. Okay, and then move your quilt to the inside of that border, which I'm going to say is about right here. Maybe I need to do a little bit lower, like that, and then come over to the far right, and you use these buttons in the same way. And you can keep playing with these, so don't stress over it at first. Okay. And now these lines here are represented by the buttons on the bottom. And so one thing you can do is select lock verticals, and if you do that, then when I had set, let me move this and I'll show you, when I had set this inner border, this line would automatically go straight. But as I know, and you probably know as well, not all borders are straight, and sometimes it's not loaded on your machine straight. So if you take lock verticals off, and then you can select an area where, you know, just drag your machine down the side of your quilt, and maybe it just goes in a little bit, and then select these buttons. So you're moving your machine around to all these places, and then you're selecting these buttons on the screen. Okay, and I'm going to say this is good. Maybe my border's a little fat right here. So the next thing you do is, well, you want to look at this too. This is your top, this up here on the screen. If you press the bottom, it'll show you what it's going to look like on the bottom, which is, this is just where we're going to lay out our designs. When you get to the bottom of your quilt, you're going to have to do the same thing I just did. So for instance, this button here represents the far right corner, so I would select the far right corner, and then the inner corner, the inner border, and then the far left, and then the inner border here. And of course this is moving my machine to those points and selecting these buttons here, tapping these with your mouse or your finger or whatever your system uses. So I know that's not very straight, but I just want to show you how that works. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the top because that's where we're working now. My quilt is rolled where it is at the top. And I need to replace it. Okay, so that, I'm going to do the inner piece. I'm going to hit lock vertical so that these will stay, just to save time. And this is why I was saying just put a practice piece on and draw some lines. I have about 4-inch borders, and that's probably enough to be able to see your pattern. You don't want to waste too much thread. Okay, so this represents my quilt top, and I'm happy with that. That works out fine. So the next thing you want to do is come down. These are all, this window here is your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step menu. So the next step is to come down and set your margins. You can click on set margins, or you can click the down arrow. And what these margins are saying where within this border do you want the design to stitch. Right now it's going to stitch all the way to the purple line on both sides. Well, since I know I got to leave some room for the binding up here, I like to make the margins on the outside a little bit larger. So I'm going to unlock this. You'll see why in a minute. Now as I start to press the outer border, see the gray line? That means it's going to stitch at the gray line, not the purple line. So that leaves me some room for the binding. And I'm going to put that at, I'm going to go ahead and put it at a 1/2 inch. Okay, and then the inside border, just because I don't want my design to come over into my quilt, I'm going to put that at 1/8 inch. So you can see those lines now. And that's all you do there. And then you go down to the next one, which is to get your pattern. You're going to pick your corner pattern, your border pattern, and then you can put another pattern in the center if you want. Make sure autofill is checked, and the system will automatically fill your area based on the dimensions that you have set when you marked your quilt in step number 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the corner. So you just click on select corner, and under gold patterns, let's see, there's a gold border set, and you'll have many other borders as well. I'm just going to go with this first one, the Arcs corner. Select that and see how it placed it perfectly in here. Okay, and then I'm going to get the border, which is the Arcs border. Open, and the autofill is going to determine that I needed 3 of those to fill the space. Now that looks really good. And because on the border and style placement menu where I had checked locked verticals, then this border is also set as my bottom border. So when I get to that border, it will be there for me. Okay, so we'll go back to, I want to go back to the top because I've got my quilt rolled so that it's at the top. Because I am in simulation mode, it keeps making me realign everything, but on your quilt it should not do that. Okay, so I've gotten the patterns. The next thing is to flip the patterns if you want to. I've only had to do this one time, and it was with a different border, and I had to actually flip the corner so that it would match. And see how, like, my corner actually ends right here, and then my pattern starts here, but I want those two to match. So I had to flip that time. So, but if you're doing the borders from Grace, you probably won't have to do that. And it also tells me here how many border patterns I have. So then the next thing is edit pattern connections. I don't really have to do anything here. Join patterns is selected. So excuse me, what that did was made my patterns join right here and right here, just like we talked about. And if you want to verify that, you can always click the plus sign up here, and you can see that they actually match. So I'm going